Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason Johnson, and I am so excited to be back with you on another one of these WhyTry hosted webinars. I'm going to be your host again today, and I'm thrilled. We've got a topic I'm really excited for. We've got some guest panelists that I'm very excited for, and we also have representing two organizations that we think really, really highly of, and we're really excited to be friends and colleagues with. So a couple things before we start. As I mentioned, my name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization, and the WhyTry organization is who has been hosting these webinars. Many of you have been on several of these before. We've been hosting these since about April or May of 2020. We started doing these early on when the pandemic hit as a way to stay connected to our network of friends that we've made. Organizationally, the WhyTry organization has been around for about 20 years. We specialize in resilience and in social emotional learning and social emotional resilience. We've worked with educators, mental health providers, corrections facilities in various different capacities throughout the country for close to 2 decades now. And we've developed some really great friends in all of those areas. And so when the pandemic hit, we wanted to be able to stay in touch. And we started doing these webinars, and it turned into a really great community where we've been able to share some great ideas, some great strategies. We've been able to give a platform to some really important voices that have great perspective and experience on these topics. And today is no exception. I'm really excited to be able to have the discussion that we're going to have today. So with that as a basis, what I'd like to do is introduce our guests here, our guest panelists, and then I'll introduce the topic. So I'm spotlighting everybody so we can hopefully all be seen at once now. And the topic today that we're going to be discussing is improving student engagement by strengthening systems. And we have 3 incredible experts here with some I think really impressive experience and great perspective on this. So our 3 guests, in no particular order, well, they're the order that I have them written down, are as follows. First, we've got Erica Peterson. Erica, this is a second go round. Erica was on one of our very first webinars and was just a great guest. We've been looking and excited to have her back, and it's finally worked out to have you back. A little bit about Erica. Erica's got nearly 2 decades with the School Innovations and Achievement Organization, that's SINA. Erica is the National Education Manager. She draws from her longstanding relationship and involvement with CSBA, COSA, TASA, and CASQA to offer districts insight and ways to connect strategies with proven practices throughout her tenure. Erica has worked with hundreds of school districts, executives providing solutions consulting in the areas of school attendance, organizational effectiveness, special education, and state mandated program compliance. Erica, what did I miss? Did I miss anything?
I think, yeah, all the alphabet groups, right? Yes.
We exist in a world of acronyms. Well, welcome, Erica. We're super excited to have you back.
Thank you.
Next, we've got Brenda Payne. Brenda has more than 30 years of progressively responsible experience with Richardson ISD in Texas. She began her career as a classroom teacher and has also served as an elementary assistant principal, and in central administrative roles in curriculum instruction and school operations. Holds a bachelor's degree in education from Texas Tech, master's in education from Texas Women's University. Brenda, you also are affiliated with School Innovations and Achievement as well. So you're our second guest representing the SINA organization. Welcome, Brenda. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Next, excited to be here.
Next, we have Sophia Almond. Miss Sophia Allman has been a public school educator for the 30 years, currently serves as the senior coordinator, district-wide transition specialist for Norfolk Public Schools in Norfolk, Virginia. Her career experiences include special education, hospital education, secondary transition support, attendance and truancy discipline, alternative ed and transition support, Section 504, PBIS, restorative practices, Title IX, etc., just to name a few. Ms. Almond is an alumnus of Old Dominion, Hampton University, and the George Washington University with degrees in psychology, special education, and educational leadership and administration. And she also serves as a trustee on the executive board of the National Association of Pupil Services Administrators, affectionately known as NAPSA. Welcome, Sophia. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this today.
Now, I mentioned before, this is a fun discussion because we're bringing a couple organizations together. Oh, I guess I should formally introduce myself. I always skip that part. My name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. My background is I'm a school psychologist. I came over from the world of public education about 6.5 years ago. My area of specialty and focus has been student resilience, adolescent resilience. I ended up getting published on the topic of resilience. And then about 6.5 years ago, I came over to the world of WhyTry, and it's been awesome to be able to continue that work around a topic that I care very, very deeply about and seems to intersect with all of these discussions that we've been able to have on these webinars. So as I mentioned before, this particular discussion is bringing together, I guess, 3 organizations. I represent the WhyTry organization. We've got Erica and Brenda representing SINA, which really specializes in providing support for districts to be able to make good decisions and provide good systemic support to really help out their kiddos. And then we have Sophia representing the NAPSA organization. And we've had, for those that have attended multiple of our webinars, we've had Chris and Larissa, both a couple times from the NAPSA organization as well. And so SINA and NAPSA has always impressed us. You always represent well and have really, I think, good and important perspectives. And so I'm excited to kind of, I feel like this is an Avengers team up that we're bringing some people with really important perspective on these topics together to discuss. So with that as the foundation, I want to kind of jump right into the discussion. The first thing I was wondering if you could do, just to give us a little more background as kind of a preparation for our discussion, I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what you've been working on and focusing on most recently, or the last little while, 1 to 2 years, however you want to frame it. And I'd love to hear about that, either from an individual perspective or an organizational perspective, however you choose to respond. And I was wondering if we could hear in this order. Let's go Erica, then Brenda, then Sophia. So Erica, you're up. Tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So as you mentioned, I'm with School Innovations and Achievement. And for those that aren't familiar with our organization, just really briefly, because it's the framework in which we do our work that we're talking about today. So we partner with districts across the country with a program that we have called the Achievement Initiative. It's an enterprise solution that improves outcomes for all students. And it's really around changing behavior to increase student success with a multi-tiered system of support and a continuous improvement model. And with that, what I've really been working on, and I think organizationally we've had to do, is 2 words really kind of came to mind for me when in asking that, and they may seem kind of juxtaposed, but I don't think they are. You know, at SINA, we've really been focused on continuity and transformation. You know, part of the title in today's webinar is systems thinking. And we understood that the instability that students have and continue to experience is now really continuity, where they're relying on us as educators to provide that to them in a time when discontinuity and instability may be the day-to-day experience that they're having. And so how we can provide stability and and continuity then is when we focus on foundational systems and processes to lead our programmatic work. And from a transformational perspective, just that concept alone that I just described can be maybe transformative, because it may be a lens that you haven't been looking at. And so often the work is led by the people in charge. And when the people in charge change, the focus then changes when it shouldn't. And so what we need to do is persist in the things that we've been doing, but maybe with modifications or transformation of the work to meet the moment that we're in. So that's really a lot of what we have been focused on, is really more of what we've been doing, right? Looking at what we've been doing, what we do works, what we know works, and focusing on those and letting go of the things and assessing our processes as it relates to what's not working, are really the things that we've been focused on in the last year or two.
Awesome. Thank you. Brenda, tell us what you've been up to.
Okay, well, you mentioned that I have 33 years of experience, and I recently retired from Richardson ISD. All of it was in Richardson ISD, but the last responsibility that I had for the last 4 years was the Assistant Superintendent for Administrative Services. And I think for the team that's on here, as I was looking at the chat and seeing everybody that was here, that does involve, ultimately, it contributes to the culture of the school district. Many of us, I don't think that we'll be able to have this conversation today without mentioning the elephant in the room, and that is COVID. And COVID has impacted all of us in our roles and responsibilities. And if we don't have a strong culture in our school district that was set up prior to an event like this pandemic, we're going to struggle. The reality of it is my role was to be focused on, I was over student services, I was over health services in the district, I was over attendance and enrollment. So you can hear the large system that I'm talking about and all the components of that. And in my work, in collaborating with SINA, we focused on the achievement initiative. And it's important for me to mention that now, because we were dealing with kids not showing up. And so working with the achievement initiative, we were able to identify who's not at school. I mean, these are kids that potentially weren't showing up already, but my job was, who are the kids? And it's not just an attendance number. It's not about 95% of our kids showing up. My work was, who is that 5% that's not showing up? Where are they? How can you find them? What communication do we have to have? And then how is that related to all of the other systems that we have in the organization? And then ultimately, how's that impacting student success? So my role was all of those things: attendance, truancy, special education, social emotional learning, and then keeping them engaged with athletics and fine arts. So that really is, in a nutshell, what I've spent, I would say, that over the last 2 years experiencing, and that constant pivot that we hear in the system. And SINA and the Achievement Initiative were a great part of the success of Richardson in finding those kids.
Awesome. Thank you, Brenda. Sophia, tell us what you've been up to, what you've been working on.
So I'll start with individually on behalf of my school division. So I meet with attendance administrators across our region, the Southeast region of Virginia, and a few Northeast regions also. People who've heard about our work group and wanted to be a part of our work group. We had to have that conversation about our students missing school. And lucky for us, we had an exemplar type of division in our group who has a system in place, who actually works really well from central office level down to boots on the ground in the school, committed to having that team approach to do root cause analysis for students and try to identify those barriers that are keeping children from school. With COVID, Brenda mentioned COVID, we had barriers that intensified with COVID, like the access to technology when students couldn't come into the building. Dealing with family loss and illness in a way that hadn't necessarily affected some families before. So we brainstormed when we came together. That's part of what I did as an individual. Also, I saw there were some people from corrections on. I assisted with developing a manual for re-enrollment for those students returning to school divisions from corrections or different alternative placements. It was really important to us that we established a system, a process, a set of protocols for those students so they could successfully transition back in. So I was happy to be a part of that. With NAPSA, this is my first year serving as a trustee. So I collaborated with our board members from across the United States. We were able to host our 55th annual conference. Our topic is administering pupil services with a focus on trauma, resiliency, and support. So I was part of that conversation with the board, getting our successful conference up and running in October. NAPSA is a national organization committed to leadership, advocacy, and quality professional development. We often partner with you all now across several areas that are often associated with student support services. So that includes your discipline, your attendance, your enrollment, health services, psychology, social work, counseling, just to name a few. And we are always encouraging new members to join us.
Awesome, thank you. And for those that are, so a couple of natural questions may come up. We'll put some links up at the end. I'm guessing some people may be interested in learning more about some of the resources that will get referenced, or organizations. We'll put links up. Just a note on NAPSA, for those that may be unfamiliar, pupil services functions very similarly to like student services, depending on where you're at. And Sophia being very, very humble, pupil services takes everything in. So I am familiar with what she's been doing, and she's been wearing every hat in the school for the last 2 years. Is that accurate?
Yes, we jokingly said, or I jokingly said when we kind of talked, it's that thankless job. We're in that department where a lot of times when people are coming to see us, they're not real happy. Something's going on that we have to address. And the school division, the people in the building may not feel like we're trying to support them, but that's exactly what we're trying to do with the students and families. So
awesome. Well, thank you. So what I want to do now, I want to pivot over, and we're going to be talking in a little bit more about some of the specific strategies or ideas around systems. But systems can sometimes feel like, kind of a big, scary or frustrating word, particularly if we haven't had a positive experience, working or having systems that we feel like support us. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit to start off with, talk about how improving student, so our purpose here is to discuss improving student engagement and attendance by strengthening systems. So I want to hear, in your opinion, how strong systems help us focus better on the students and what you think the key is to strengthening systems. Let's go, Brenda, Sophia, Erica.
Okay, so Erica, if you wouldn't mind showing my first slide. What I mentioned in the first question was about culture. And I think that your systems are heavily related to whatever culture exists in your organization. And it happens to be that in Richardson ISD, and I will speak to that because that's where my experience comes from. I'm one of you, and that's really why I'm here. And what I'm showing you here is a slide that probably looks pretty typical to you, right? So most people think, well, the superintendent is at the top, and then there's central office, and then there's the campus, and then there's the teachers, and then there's the kids. Well, in our district, our superintendent, Dr. Jeannie Stone, you can see that this slide was actually created by her. She drove the culture. But in reality, our system for attendance and engagement came from this slide that I'm about to show you. The very next slide is really actually how our system addressed attendance. This is a mindset shift. This is a system. This is a systems thinking. This is the way we did things. This is how our pyramid was set up. The superintendent was at the bottom, constantly supporting whatever we needed to do as an organization to support students. And so when you think about this, this right here is a system. That's the belief system that everything that is done is built around superintendent, central office, campus level teachers, and students. That's our system of support. This was developed when she very first came to our district. But when we talk about attendance, we were focusing on excessive excused absences before COVID hit. And that was a system that we created to address our attendance issue. So we were set up for this situation of student attendance gaps, chronic absenteeism, and all of the things that were coming along with attendance issues and enrollment because of this mind shift. So this right here, when I say that it has to do with systems, what you have to be thinking about is, do you have a foundation in your organization that every system and belief is built upon? And that is how our systems of support is strategized. And I will tell you that I continue to think this way, even though I'm no longer a district employee.
Awesome. Thank you.
So you can leave that slide up. That mindset shift is powerful. We behave based on what we believe. And so we as professionals behave based on what we believe. That superintendent, our superintendent has us focusing on equity and excellence for all. We're supposed to be addressing the needs of students, focusing on a culture of caring for every student, no matter what. Is that an easy job to do? No, it is not. But doing that touches every aspect of what someone in student services or student support services does. For me, my belief is that strong systems help establish sustainability. Erica mentioned earlier in her introduction that, you know, sometimes school divisions, we all know they implement initiatives, and when this person leaves, then that's out of the window and something else starts. Or the initiative is there and it seems to be working, or it is effective, but the person who was driving it and knew it leaves, and because there wasn't complete buy-in, it fades away. We're unable to sustain it. So strong systems help establish sustainability, as well as the safe cultural environments for everyone, that's staff and students. Systematic approaches use data to tell the story of what may be occurring and establishes the role of all invested parties. It involves a team, and everything is focused on the student. It takes a team following an established process, regardless of who remains employed, I've said that already, and who doesn't. And from my experience in the buildings that implement a systems approach, we have one of our middle schools that's very exemplar in my opinion. Their focus was building relationships with students. When COVID was going on, they used every method of virtual engagement that they could to have community meetings with parents, community meetings with community agencies who could support students and families. The principal had dinner meetings where they would play games. I mean, they did all kinds of things to really get to know and build relationships with their students, to keep them engaged throughout that year. And their attendance benefited from those types of interactions.
I'd like to build on this, and I appreciate the insights that you both have shared, which is this is a different way of thinking about it, and we're in the people business, right? And as a counselor, we're working with kids and our colleagues. As a teacher, same thing, but it's applying this framework. And I want to give you a model, because this is, everybody has a process, or at least they say they do. And this isn't about, what we're talking about today isn't process for process sake. It's important that your processes align in research and in results, and looking at your processes from that lens. Find out what the successful people are doing. And Sophia said they're joining her work group because of that, because they're having success. But this is looking at what you do as day to day from a foundational level. We have 5 principles that kind of guide our work. And I want to give you this methodology because you can apply it to anything that you're doing or that you're tasked with. And we call it our 5+1, and it's our model that we use in any systems that we're designing to support student outcomes. So the achievement initiative, et cetera, that we do are all built on this framework. And the first piece of this is process, and focusing on systemic problems require enterprise solutions. And as Sophia said, things that are scalable, replicable, that don't crumble when that person leaves. And so effectively changing processes is what leads to the way to change and for culture and behavior. And that's what Brenda's talking about in terms of how they are operating, the lens in which they view the world, because they have a model in place. Getting people what you want done, to making it easy, meaningful. Do people have the right tools? So as you're looking at your processes, are there places to automate or innovate, to provide supports? We're all so spread thin right now. I think we all feel tired, and our people are what make our systems work. And so investing in systems that support our people, having good data. How do we know what we need to be doing? Is what we're doing working or not? That comes through data. And then our processes have to be with fidelity, right? If I'm working on something that nobody else is ever looking at, then it might not be that important, but having oversight. So for us as leaders in the work that we do, inspecting what we expect. And then communication, it's always around communication, and we can never over communicate, communicating outcomes. If I've asked somebody to work on something, then asking them how it's going, right? And that's really where we come from as a place of a leader. I think too often in schools, we think that leader is associated with the title, that this has to be the superintendent. But what I'm saying from a systems thinking, every person on this webinar is a leader. You're in charge of something, and you own that, and you can drive this using this model and using this framework. It doesn't happen without you, and you care about the kids, you care about the outcomes, and that's leadership. It doesn't matter if you're a counselor, a teacher, a social worker, whatever, where you are. Leaders are what they do, not a title that's given to them. And so that's really this framework that we use. And when we implement these processes, when the work that you do aligns in these areas that you have a process that's on scale, replicable, you have the people doing the work, understanding what's expected, communicating out and assessing and evaluating the outcomes, that's where change comes from. And that's what's possible. So the beauty is focusing on a process. When you have a systematized process in place, then you can look for those places to create efficiency. And so as we've talked a little bit about, I do actually have a visual to share in terms of why it's so important to have a systems focus when you approach the work in terms of improving engagement and attendance with students and connecting with your families and your parents, because it's exactly what Brenda and Sophia spoke to, that many times in districts, what we see is design matters. When you're approaching from this work from a foundation perspective, many initiatives are personnel driven. And then when we say changes in personnel, we see changes in outcomes. And we see wasted resources. Campus A is doing this, Campus B is doing that, and they're getting different results. And so this is where we have an opportunity to look at how we're approaching the work. What we know and what the data supports is that outreach to families works. It's the volume that we are experiencing in the current environment that's burying this message. But when you have a strong system in place, then the system is always operating and functioning and is not dependent on the person who's driving it, because it's always working in the background. And that's the approach to this work that we're talking about. And as we talk about from an equity lens and the fact that we know that some of our most vulnerable students, it's our most vulnerable students that are requiring us to have a systematic approach to the work, to have that continuous improvement model in place so that no student falls through the cracks in terms of our outreach and engagement efforts. And I'm just going to say it. I mean, staffing is tough these days. People are either out or districts are trying to hire and can't fill positions. And so providing tools, having a system in place that no matter who you are, you can rely on, you know that this is working. That's where you go get coherent strategies and reliable, replicable results. So I hope this framework on these last two slides is a lens in which you can use in evaluating your approach to this work. I think of it in terms of when we look at systems in place, whether it's software, things like that, that can automate and create tools of support for you. You know, the evolution is, I think of when we started as educators, right? Things were paper and pen, and I'm old enough to say I took a typing class, and then in high school it was a keyboarding class, and we have student information systems. This is progressive. And then when we look at the pandemic and the districts that were in the best position 2 years ago, if shutdowns occurred in your community, it was those districts that had learning management systems. And so attendance management systems and things like that is just this next step, and really another way to support the work to ensure that the engagement efforts are as effective as possible. So that's really where I think we have opportunity to evaluate what we're doing in terms of how we engage with students.
That's great. Thank you all. I did want to mention, I'm going to put Brenda and Sophia on the spot just a little bit. Maisie asked a question that it's interesting. It's come up a couple times before in some of our previous webinars. So when you had the pyramid up with the kids, the upside down one with where the students were at the top, Maisie asked the question where you feel like counselors fall within the norm on that. That was one I didn't want to let go, because I think that is one thing, it's a really important resource that this question comes up a lot. Specifically, Brenda, Sophia, do you have any input on where you would where you include counselors within that model?
So I'll be happy to start and just say to you that as part of the process, when we're working through attendance, one of the steps that you have to look at is, first of all, when you're looking at kids individually and situations individually, as part of the process, the why the student isn't showing up isn't always that easy to solve. And so many times where the counselor fits in that pyramid, it can be from the central level, or it can be more at the campus level, in determining what additional things we need to do for kids. And I can just say that one of the things that our counselors have been instrumental as part of that process is sitting in those, I think, the multi-tiered systems of support. I think we're all familiar, RTI, whatever. Across the stage from and our counselors sat in those meetings. And so our counselors were there to determine, and they were part of that system of determining what is it that the student needs and what supports they need, and they play the role there. So they fit at the campus level, but they can also fit at the central level, because we cannot forget that, as I think Erica said, everyone is struggling right now. Everyone is struggling. So if we don't take care of our staff, if we don't take care of our teachers can't take care of our kids. So as your system is developing supports, they can't skip over. And that's when you think about that pyramid, that bottom up versus top down, you're getting to those counselors, you're getting to those teachers before you ever get to the kids, so that your kids get the best version of everyone by the time it filters to them. And so I think that's where the counselors fit in. They play so many roles in our district, and I think overall, and so do, I noticed a lot of social workers on here too. I think a lot of districts have community liaisons or some type of social support. They fit in right there with those counselors, supporting teachers and students.
Well said, well said. For the school instructional support personnel, your school counselors, your psychologists, your social workers, I don't know that you are in one particular place. I think you slide between all of those levels depending on what the need is. Brenda emphasized that it's per kid, it's individualized, it's per student. And then those adults that are working with the students, I know that plenty of you all have examples in your mind that you've been exposed to a situation or a student not wanting to attend school. And it's the adult behavior that's kind of triggering that. And not that your role is to support the staff necessarily as part of your job description, but your mindset, you bought into the division's commitment to supporting students and intervening where needed. So you do the deep dive when you're looking for root causes and you position yourself to support where needed. But it could be for staff, and it definitely could be right alongside the teachers with the students.
Awesome. Thanks for being willing to answer that on the spot. I want to get in now. This is, I think, going to be one of the things that will be, I hope, really interesting to our attendees. So one of the reasons this topic came up is organizationally, and I oversee the training modules for our organization. We train thousands of educators and mental health professionals a year, and a lot of our training involves processing what our significant challenges are right now that we're focusing on. And two of the most common challenges that have been coming up over the last year have been attendance issues and then student engagement. It seems to be a universal difficulty, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to discuss this today. And so my question for you now, because we've been talking about systems and the importance of systems, I was curious if you have any examples of systems that you've seen implemented or that you're currently working on that have been effective in addressing those challenges, specifically the student engagement and the attendance piece, because I think that's that thing that's just right now, it's literally the thing that's keeping many of us awake at night. So I'd love to hear some examples from you of what you've seen or what you're working on. Let's go Sophia, Erica, and Brenda for this one.
Okay, so unfortunately, because I consider my district a work in progress, I don't necessarily have an example from my division. But there is a division, Hampton City Public Schools. I was wrestling with whether I wanted to say them or not, but I think they deserve the shout out. They participate in my work group, and Hampton City Public Schools has done an excellent job of establishing a systems approach to addressing attendance. Their system is based on 4 equitable foundations. Erica mentioned earlier about equity. For Hampton, their lens on addressing attendance is not necessarily attendance, is giving children not equal equity, but equity and access to school and instruction. So their equitable foundations are physical and emotional health and safety, feelings of belonging, connection, and support, academic challenge and engagement, and relationships that they can trust. Their thing is students attend and participate when they experience and trust positive learning conditions. That's where they begin. They engage everyone. From that foundation, they establish the criteria for an early warning system, procedures for conducting a root cause analysis, aligning support with school and community resources, and establishing a protocol for continued monitoring. They provide professional development for staff to be able to do this. The central office team is present in the building. Part of that protocol says when they need to be engaged in the process. In that division, various departments and staff across various disciplines are part of their effort to engage their students and diligently work to keep them in school. The school counselor wanted to know, where do I fit in? We talked about the school social worker, but it could be the custodian who has the best insight on this particular child as to what's going on when you actually take the time to identify the concern or the symptom. That's the top of the iceberg. Dig a little deeper, gathering more information, finding out that underneath the surface there are these causes for that symptom of missing school and being able to do something about it. So Hampton City Public Schools in Virginia is a good exemplar as far as establishing a systemic process that as a result, they're able to implement appropriate mitigating measures to keep their students in school. Even through COVID, they had some, everybody had some influx of attendance issues, but they and their system, it really didn't change. It really didn't change. They just kept it moving. That second or third absence triggers. things. And sometimes it didn't even wait to the second or third absence. That first absence, they get, I miss you, where are you type of involvement.
That's awesome. Thank you. Erica.
Thank you. Sorry, trigger finger, gotta unmute. You know, I appreciate that. Again, when we've seen with our district's data, that continuous improvement model that I shared, that framework works. So implementing that lens, because that lens includes data and communication, and we use the data that we get on who's coming, who's not coming, to determine how we communicate and when we communicate. What we have learned and the current pandemic has demonstrated is that we have to communicate early and often, and even when no one feels like anybody's listening. I had an educator yesterday share it with me that he feels like he's banging his head against the wall. You know, but there is a term in marketing called effective frequency, and it speaks to the number of times a person has heard a message to recognize that they've heard it before, and not to jump the shark, but it's not once. And a lot of communications tend to be sort of one and done. We give a handbook at the first day of school, right? Maybe now it's emailed and it's one and done. We've told you everything you need to know. But when we talk about engagement and the messages in terms of setting expectations around showing up and coming to school, we have to really understand that we have to continue and have continuous communication with our families. From an effective frequency standpoint, they say it's a minimum of 5 to 10 times. Successful systems communicate today, tomorrow, and beyond across the organization. And outcome matter data, I think outcome data matters, especially in light of the current environment. So I want to just share a quick visual in terms of what's working in terms of outcome data. So for districts that we've supported that have a systems approach to getting and keeping kids in school, we have a success metric we call a save rate, saving kids from becoming chronically absent and eventually dropping out of school. And this is just looking at the first intervention that we support by ethnicity. And what we're seeing today, this is data through December, is that communications from campuses reaching out to your families does have an impact. Again, I said it earlier, the volume is losing this message because so many kids are being impacted at levels that we've never seen in terms of absentee issues before. But this is just showing the first intervention that we deploy through our achievement initiative across the ethnic subgroups in terms of the save rate, meaning they don't go on to accrue additional absences to require additional intervention. This is a time when many people do not want to necessarily or are concerned about sending come to school messages to their parents and to their families, but they do work and they're necessary. And again, when I started with continuity, this is what many of you have always been doing, and you need to continue to do it. If anything, I'd say ramp it up. So let me stop my share.
That's great, Erica. Troy, hopefully that answered the question. And we're going to put up contact information if you have follow-up questions towards the end that we don't get to because we will have limited time here. Brenda, tell us a little bit about some examples that you've seen.
Okay, so I'm going to actually take this to a district level when I talked again about the culture of the district and putting systems in place that are not just one-offs. Right? So, because when you do that, some do, some don't, some will, some won't. You're not going to get consistency. So I'm going to use specifically the attendance model and say that about three years ago, when our district recognized, first, you have to know you have a problem to know what kind of system or solution you have to put into place. We knew we had a problem. And like I said earlier, it was at that time, we were really focusing on how much excused absences were affecting our overall attendance, which is ultimately affecting student success. It really wasn't about the money. It was about the gaps that absences cause. Now you add this to it. So what we did is we said, we don't have the solution in our district, and we knew we didn't. And I bet many of you that are on this call today probably have a student information system. You teachers put their absences in, and Sometimes kids go to truancy court and those things happen, but we knew that that was not capturing our students, nor was it in any way doing the types of interventions that we needed to do. So we sought out a solution, and that was through SINA. We did all of the things that you do. You go and you have all the vendors come in and they share their product. But what we found is we needed something in our system that was intuitive, that brought the problem to you so that you didn't have to go in and say, gee, I wonder how many excused absences I have. I wonder how many kids have missed this many days. I wonder what my truancy rate is. I wonder if there's been any intervention done on this student. Who's helping with this child? So what we discovered is we didn't have anything like that. And we really weren't communicating with our parents to the degree that we should have been. Parents need to know, just like Erica said, those touch points have to happen. So what we did as a district, our system for monitoring attendance is district-wide. Every single principal uses the same process and has to follow the same steps. They monitor student attendance. They have the teachers put in the absences, but weekly, our principals get notified that they need to go in and look. Here are the students at your school that have missed 3 days, 5 days, 9 days. And after they've missed 3 days, parents receive a letter. And I know that sounds crazy. And it sounds like, well, do they get an email? Well, they do. They can get an email. They can get a text message. But what we have discovered is that parents really like letters. It feels official. It takes notice. I can delete an email, but I always want to open up that letter just in case. What if it's something important? So what we've been able to establish through this initiative is our parents do get notification. They get notification if their child hasn't been in school. We reach out to them, say, let's conference. How can we support you? Once again, you can hear how that feeds in the counselor. It might feed in child nutrition. It might feed in the classroom teacher. It might mean that we need to go provide them food and resources. You just never know what you're going to discover when you start this communication trend. But not only do we communicate to our families when kids aren't showing up, but we also communicated with our families when they were showing up. And Erica has a slide I want you to see, because you don't want everything about attendance to be negative. We want to celebrate our families. And so what we did for positive communication, we told parents why it was important for kids to be in school, the benefits of being in school. They also, our students received positive, our superintendent did positive letters. She did videos about the importance of coming to school. We did notifications of students who missed less than like 1% of the school year. I mean, it was a very small amount, but y'all wouldn't believe how much they love this, right down to our principals who are responsible for providing this tool. They have children in the district. And I was at something the other day, and one of our principals said, hey, Brenda, I know you retired, but I have to tell you, my kids were so excited when they got their positive note that they'd been in school. And she said, it made me really proud as a parent that I've continued to stay steadfast when I could for my kids to come to school. So it's just as important to communicate that you're not at school, but it's also communicating that you were at school and we recognized you showing up. And so what I would say is that sometimes we have to go outside of our organization in order to find the tools and resources to help us. And I would also say that it's important to say that if you're looking at an issue that is system-wide, then you need a system-wide solution. Attendance is a mind shift. We cannot leave this up to the campuses solely to do their version of what they think it takes for kids to get to school and how to communicate to parents. And so I just believe that we were able to identify a problem and put together a pretty solid solution. And it has definitely benefited us throughout the pandemic, because we were able to communicate based on what we were seeing. particularly with our high school students that were flipping it back and forth with virtual learning and coming to school. And so, again, looking at it from a systems perspective, this is a solution that we came up with to address attendance and also enrollment, because we were able to find kids this way too.
And if I could just tag on to what Brenda's saying, I think I key in on the word positive. I just think that's so important right now. So many messages kids receive are negative messages, and there's power in positive engagement. And I've heard similar stories. And so I think a lot of times when I think of traditional school communications, they may not be the most positive in tone. And I just think that that's what's really required right now, is even as frustrated as we get, and when we're engaging with our colleagues, the positives, again, that feedback loop of thank you for getting those communications out, I heard back, or thank you for checking in on that family, I heard back. But positive, we're just in such a negative environment these days that I really think a key takeaway too from a systems approach is, where can you find the wins, celebrate the successes?
That's so good. Thank you. I was over here cheering in the background at the positive communication slide. It definitely speaks to my my school psychologist heart that loves the PBIS model. And it's interesting. We come up with these models, we come up with these initiatives, and we get buy-in at a certain level, and we say, yes, it works in this circumstance. And then I think sometimes we do limit ourselves in applying them really broadly. And some of these things I think really can help out even, some of the PBIS by broadening the lens that we're using it through. So I want to go now. We've got a little bit of time left. This is an interesting group that we have on right now of attendees. And this is an interesting discussion because I think this particular group has probably the most exaggerated difference from a micro to a macro level that we've had in some time, meaning we literally have people on here at the state level that are from state departments of education that are in attendance here. In fact, somebody asked about how these concepts can apply to improving systems at the state level. But then we also have a tremendous amount of classroom teachers and individuals that are working within their own office within the school, as well as various support staff. And then everybody within that spectrum has varying levels of support. Some people may feel like they come from a very supportive district, and other people may be frustrated and feel like they just don't have the district support that they need. So the thing I think I want to have as our kind of our final discussion point today, and I really do think this probably warrants further discussion. So maybe I can convince my my panelists to come back to continue this discussion. But I am curious, what tips or strategies or any resources or ideas do you have for our attendees that could range anywhere from a classroom or office level all the way up to a state level and everything in between? What tips or strategies do you have for somebody to be able to start trying to strengthen their systems or better leverage their systems that they already have to try to positively impact these challenges that we have and ultimately positively impact our students? So tips, strategies, let's start Erica, then go Brenda, then Sophia.
Yeah, thank you. So first, I always look for the opportunity and the challenge, and I think we can all acknowledge the challenge of the current environment with the pandemic in impacting education. And it doesn't matter whether it's on the micro level or the macro level. I would say focus on the fundamentals. We have an incredible opportunity. Districts are receiving stimulus dollars or other sources of funding, et cetera. And so it can give rise to implementing all kinds of new programs, processes, people, right? But start with a systems approach. That's what I mean by when I say focus on the fundamentals, and really start with looking at what we're doing, why we're doing it, evaluating what's working, what's not working. You have things that you're doing that is just because this is how you were taught or trained, or this is how so-and-so, this is how Brenda did it, so this is what I'm going to do. Seek support and solutions to what's not working. decide what systems are in place and how we incorporate staff into our processes, not the other way around. And again, stay positive. I'm going to keep, beating that drum. But those are the things that I think, it's looking at your data. As Brenda said, the data should inform, it should tell a story. And so as you're looking at what am I doing, it's really challenging the process that you have. Challenge your process would be the tip that I would have for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go Brenda next.
So I was actually really thinking, I've thought a lot about this because it is such a wide range in the audience. And I think that's what's so important about this. You can be your system. Like, it doesn't have to be this organization. And so when I take myself back to when I was a third grade teacher. I would identify that I had something that I wanted to address. Might not be a problem. I think that's kind of a harsh word to use. I had something that I wanted organization. I wanted consistency. I wanted sustainability. And so with that drove the why, right? Why do I want to do it? Why do I really need to create the system? Because if you don't know why you need it, you're not going to be able to create it, because you're going to get hung up about, a quarter of the way through. So my advice is it usually does come with a problem. And then ultimately you determine what steps you need to take in order to get there. And I think sometimes when we talk about it, it sounds like it's a lengthy process. It doesn't have to be. Creating a system. We create procedures and routines for our kids in the classroom. That's a system. Counselors provide supports for the kids. So when I say this, you really are just looking at it from a sustainability and the ability to make a difference in you and making your life better. And I think we get really hung up in thinking that it has to be a bunch of people or a bunch of things. A system can be you. So I guess that's my advice, is just really thinking through what is the solution that you strive for, and can you create a system for that, and can it be sustainable?
Great. Thank you. Sophia.
I love that you said that I could be a system, because in a division, when I don't have direct line authority to administrators, instead I have to use the power of influence with administrators. I have to be my system. In my division, we are working with our Virginia Department of Education multi-tiered systems of support coaches. So my tip would be to take the beginning stages of implementing your system with Fidelity seriously. Without the commitment to the mindset change that includes the division leaders and the building staff, without the willingness to really look at the data to see where we currently are, and without developing realistic action plans for integrating three things: evidence-based practices, the data that will be the division's initial focus, and establishing those diverse teams, or if it's just me, establishing my routine and protocol and understanding my why, then I'll find myself right back starting in a hamster wheel, starting the same things or reintroducing similar things without any real direction. So I say take that piece of implementing that system in the beginning with Fidelity very seriously.
That's awesome. That was definitely an aha moment for me as well. The idea of myself being able to be a system. I mean, on the one hand, it seems so obvious, but on the other hand, I think I needed to hear it, because it is really hard at times. The other thing I would throw out, and this has been one of my favorite things about these webinars, we have community systems as well. And like all of the attendees on here, we're a community, and we have people that have showed up for dozens of these, and they keep coming back to be part of the discussion. We're going to put all of our contact information up at the end. And I can't speak on behalf of the other three, but I'm confident that they shared it with me from the same spirit that I share mine. We really do love hearing from you. And so, we hope you'll consider us part of your support system as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out and collaborate with us, with any of us, and follow up with any questions, because we really want to support you all through that.
May I add one thing? Since I
Please.
mentioned Hampton City Public Schools, and I saw in the chat that someone put the link there, the Virginia Department of Education has a YouTube website, and Hampton City Public Schools was a facilitator, a speaker in several of their webinars about chronic absenteeism, addressing attendance or student engagement. So if you were to look through their YouTube channel, you probably would hear some of the things that help benefit that school division.
Awesome. Thank you. And I would throw in another plug, and I'll try to link it here as well. We've got all of our webinars recorded on our channel as well. You can find them on our website, WhyTry.org, but there's a really nice library of existing content there that you can go through as well. We're about out of time. I want to give you all one last question, and then we'll conclude. And it's a question I like asking. I like hearing your response. The question is this: what is something that's giving you hope right now? Just share with us something positive that's giving you hope right now. Also, at this time, feel free, if there's something that you think people might be interested in looking at within your organization, direct them there. I know, Erica, you had something you wanted to offer to our attendees that maybe you can tell them about as well. For this one, let's go Brenda, Sophia, and then Erica. And while you all are talking, I'm going to be looping our contact information so you have that up as well.
What's giving me hope right now is the perseverance of our teachers and our campus administrators and our central office and all of our support systems for our schools, because they are the ones that are boots on the ground. And it just continues to remind me of the love we have for kids and our perseverance, and that, you know, once an educator, always an educator. And I think that's what gives me hope right now, is that we have good people caring for kids.
Awesome. Thank you.
For me, when I looked at this possible question, I was thinking, man, right now, I'm happy. What gives me hope is that I'm not an island. I'm not in this by myself. My work group gives me that affirmation, kind of sort of that support. Being part of this, I now have gotten to know a new resource, SIA, and then my evolving relationship with WhyTry, and then just my professional growth with NAPSA. So those things give me hope that I can make a difference on behalf of our students. The children are our future. That's not just a catchphrase. I believe that.
Thank you. Erica.
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is actually the opportunity, how as educators, we are always rising to meet the moment. I love the creativity and the innovation that comes from education. What I think is what you know and what's important is that communicating with our families is critical. That having a process and a system to approach this work to ensure equity as we connect and communicate with our families inspires me. We are so committed to this. We are sharing, and if I can really quickly share, it will be in an email. Oh, it says I can't, so that's okay. But we're going to actually, to help support your communications, look at your systems, look at your processes. Everybody's
You can share it now, Erica.
Okay, thanks. Everyone's in a different place. Everyone's got a different system, a different process to support the work that you're doing. To all attendees on this webinar, at the after the conclusion, we'll be sending out some social media posts for you, some attendance awareness type of social media to, again, encourage that communication, start the communication with your families or continue it depending on where you're at. So we will be providing that, where you can download free social media posts that are ready to go, that you can post at your campus for your district about coming to school, showing up, and why it matters.
That's awesome. That's really generous of you. I've seen some of the stuff that you have, and it's really fun, and it's a really great way to have some pre-built content that you can share to help kind of broaden this message and help express that. For me, and this is where I try not to get too emotional, too sappy, but this is the thing that's giving me hope is the educators right now. I feel really fortunate. I get to do this at a macro level, throughout the country. I oversee the research and development and the training for the WhyTry organization. And as such, I have trained thousands of educators throughout the country, thousands of mental health professionals throughout the country. And that's given me a ton of hope, seeing how incredible you all are the best humans in the world that are doing this. But then I'm also involved at the state level and at my local level as well. And right now, we knew 2020 was going to be hard. And then somehow 2021 came in and it was just as hard, if not harder in some ways. And I have so many educators that are close to me that I care very deeply about that really are hurting right now. And I just want to say to all of you, we see you and we really want you to feel supported. I'm hoping this information in this community is a support to you. And this share of ideas really does give me hope, because all of you are bravely showing up and trying to deal with what is still very unprecedented times within education. And it's really hard, but these are incredible humans that are doing this. And we have incredible people like Erica and Brenda and Sophia that have committed their lives to really trying to support one another through this. And so this community that I get to be a part of really does give me hope. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. I'm going to loop our contact information at the end. Any parting thoughts? So this loop will have information on the NAPSA and the SINA organization. If you're interested in taking a look at that, these are great organizations. We take our professional relationships very seriously, and we really try to collaborate and partner up with people that we feel like meet a very high standard of trying to help kids in a way that we feel lines up with how we view it from a mission standpoint as well. And so we've got contact information for all of us as individuals there. We also have contact information. Check out any of these organizations. So grateful for all of you. And in conclusion, let's just give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you to our attendees. We'd love to hear from any of you. And if you want to find out about any more of our organizations, take a look at any of these links. We've got a QR code. You can just put your camera up on it, and it will give you some information on the WhyTry organization. And then we've got our NAPSA SINA organization as well. Ladies, thank you so much. You did phenomenal. Do you have anything you want to add organizationally that people need to be aware of, conferences or anything coming up?
I can just say, check out the NAPSA website. We don't necessarily have a conference coming up right now, but we will in October, and they're great conferences, very informative.
And I can say that if anybody is going to our TASA Midwinter here in Texas, that's a conference we have coming up this week in Austin. I think I saw Houston in there and a few other from Texas. Be sure to check out a presentation that I'm doing with another person from SINA during one of the group sessions. I think I'm doing it on Monday at like 1 o'clock. So look out for that one. And also just look for me throughout the conference and we can connect.
So in addition to the resources that we're sharing and that will be sent in the follow-up email, you can always go to our website. I write a blog constantly talking about different topics, headlines that come up around attendance and engagement and our take and how we suggest districts approach the work. You're also welcome. We have an events page where you can see where all of our people are throughout the country at different conferences and events. So thank you for being so generous with your time and joining us today. I appreciate everyone that was on the webinar.
And Erica, feel free to link your blog in the chat if you'd like. We still have a fair amount of people on. And with that, thank you, everybody. We recorded this. If you want to share this with your staff, with your administration, whoever, we will have it loaded up on our website, whytry.org. Probably by tomorrow morning, there will be a link to our YouTube channel. And then otherwise, I'm going to play us out with some music because that's what I like to do.